Hello everyone. Welcome to InfoFire, the fireside chat series from Information Matters. Information Matters brings visionaries and experts from diverse domains to share their perspectives on a chosen topic. Each episode is a conversation between our guest and the host. I am Shalini R, your host for this series. I am an academic with more than 4 decades of experience in teaching and researching information. I founded 2 educational institutions. The first is the International School of Information Management at the University of Mysore, the first high school in India in the year 2005 with a seed grant from the Ford Foundation. In the year 2012, I founded the Myra School of Business with a focus on triple bottom line. In today's episode, I am in conversation with Dr. Nicholas Belkin, Distinguished Professor of Information Science, Emeritus at the School of Communication and Information, Rutgers University. Professor Belkin is one of the most distinguished scholars in the field of information science and technology. His scholarship and contributions are immense, seminal, and foundational. Belkin's seminal contributions include his conceptualization of information and the Ask Anomalous State of Knowledge hypothesis and framework for information retrieval. He is considered as one of the founders of the cognitive paradigm of information science. His groundbreaking work on cognitive viewpoint in information science has been steering scholars and professionals working in the areas of information behavior for decades. Most scholars consider that Belkin's information notions and models developed in the 1970s are as relevant today as they were almost 50 years ago and continue to shape the field. Belkin has also made a significant contribution in integrating research in the 2 streams, information seeking behavior and information retrieval. Belkin graduated in Russian language and literature and then went on to study library science at the University of Washington. He later obtained his PhD from the University of London in 1977 and worked in the Department of Information Science of the University of London till 1985. He joined the Faculty of Communication and Information at Rutgers University in 1985, where he continued to work till his retirement in 2020. Belkin has won numerous honors and received an array of awards, including a hat trick from the Association for Information Science and Technology that includes the ACCT Award of Merit, the Award for Excellence in Research in Information Science, and the Outstanding Information Science Teacher Award. Belkin was also the president of ACCT and held numerous leadership positions in the Association for Computing Machinery as well. He has also received the ACM SIG IR Salton Award. Recently, he was named inaugural Association for Information Science and Technology Fellow Award recipient. His most recent projects have focused on personalization of information interaction based on searchers' current and past behaviors and on methods for evaluation of whole session search. His current interest focuses on implications for LIS of the ubiquity of information in daily life, on which he has given keynote presentations at a variety of venues including CLEF 2018, FIRE 2019, BIRDS 2020 and LIDA 2021 and the 2022 Stallman Distinguished Lecture at the University of Texas, Austin. Professor Belkin's research has been supported by many agencies, including NSF, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, Google, DARPA, NIST, the US Department of Education, the British Library Research and Development Department, and NATO. Let us have a chat with Nick Belkin on the topic of Whither Information Science. Hi Nick, welcome to InfoFire, the fireside chat series from Information Matters. It's an absolute delight and a pleasure and a privilege to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Nick.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm really pleased to be able to do it.
Thank you once again. The field of information science has had its origins in the 1960s. However, it still continues its quest for a search for an identity. This unending quest for identity is also due to the fact that information, the notion of information, is diverse. It's all pervasive, it's elusive, and leading to diverse conceptualization of information. And you, Nick, conceptualized information in the 1970s, and according to many, I'm one of them, your concept of information, in fact, directed the research and the field of information itself. It shaped the field of information science. And your concept of information continues to shape the field even today. But the focus, that is you, when you conceived the idea of information or gave the notion of information, it shifted the focus from the objectivist notion to subjectivist notion. Especially, I would say, from information to the recipient of information and the impact or the effect information had on the recipient. And your conceptualization of information, if I have understood correctly, is actually anchored to the structure and image. So today, almost 5 decades later, what are your views or thoughts on the notion of information? Since today we have all kinds of information, does your notion of information, conceptualized for almost 5 decades back, hold water in the current age of dynamic digital information landscape?
Okay. Well, of course, the concept of information that I developed in the 1970s was heavily conditioned on the circumstances at that time, but as it must be, right? However, I think that the general concept of information as being a structure associated with a text, meaning some kind of message, with which people interact, right? And which is capable and perhaps intends to modify that person's state of knowledge, image, that is. I think that this general idea, in particular, there are changes in their anomalous state of knowledge, which is still valid as a basis for the general purpose of designing systems and services aimed at what I understand now to be the goal of at least the information retrieval aspects of information science, and perhaps information science more generally. That is, I see now that goal as supporting people in achieving their goals and accomplishing their tasks, living their lives through effective and perhaps even pleasurable interaction with information. Okay, and this is information which this concept of information is structures coming to you that change the way you view the world. This is a statement of the goal that's broader and more specific than what I understood it to be when I first developed this concept, that is, facilitating the effective communication of desired information between human generator and human user. Okay, human now is perhaps, well, we'll see about that. But in general, I think that people interact these days just as they did when I was first developing this concept, with structured information. And that kind of information that I think information science is concerned with helping people to interact with information understood in this.
Yeah, true that. In fact, I concur with you, and I still continue to believe that it is still structure and changing the image structure, or the model, whatever word you use, right? I still believe even in the current digital age, with not only the text but other things too. So I totally agree with you. Not because I'm talking to you. I've just recently written a paper still saying that, for a local journal about your notion of information and how it is valid even today. Well, Nick, you are one of the founders of the cognitive paradigm of information science. In the current digital era, as we spoke, devices, sensors, etc., have become part of the information milieu, right? So the concept of distributed cognition, developed by cognitive anthropologist Edwin Hutchins in the 1990s, has gained some attention and traction. Mm-hmm. I have also been using that idea of distributed cognition. So according to Hutchins, the mental representations, which in the classical cognitive science was in the individual brain, is now distributed in external artifacts such as computers, or including socio-cultural systems, work teams, etc. And these are the tools to think and perceive the world. What are your views? Because I've also read about, you have used the concept of the embodied person. Is it something similar or is it different?
It's similar, but as I've looked at what Hutchins and others in the distributed cognition community have talked about, it's not clear to me that their concept of distribution of cognition amongst different actors is directly applicable to the concept of how an individual interacts with information. That's not, at least in the information science sense. When I think about the embodied person, I think about the person who is, let me think. The person who is interacting with the world itself, right? Okay, not necessarily as a cognitive partner, but as within that context. Distributed cognition also suggests that is related to the concept of cognitive sociology, and where our individual understandings of things are socially constructed. And I see this as more as a closer as closer to my concepts to how we can usefully think about how to support people in their interactions with information. Of course, there are also, as we've seen through research and indeed in practice in group and collaborative information seeking and information and task accomplishment,
Yeah.
We need to think also about how the cognitive actors interact with one another. That means we need to understand the person within a context of other cognitive actors, or within the context of a physical and social environment. And I see this as this is what I mean by the embodied person. How do these things affect us? I guess maybe distributed cognition is a way to approach this. But I haven't, in looking at Hutchins' work, and in particular in its application to human-computer interaction, I don't quite see the direct relevance of that. Okay. So far.
Okay, thank you. Continuing that in a way, the information milieu has dramatically changed from information scarcity to information ubiquity, right? You have used the word information ubiquity recently in many talks and papers. So, I mean, in my view, accordingly, from a facilitating access in the earlier era, today information science needs to focus more on how one can navigate or facilitate the navigation for a person in this vast and varied information world. So what, according to you, should we, when I say we, I mean information science, should be focusing on in the era of information ubiquity as different from information scarcity?
That's very good. Thank you. I mean, this is it. I think actually it's never the case that information was scarce. It was just difficult to get, right? And perhaps now it's too easy, right? Okay. Which is a nice point. I think what we need to do is to understand people in their interactions with information as a whole, in their daily lives, in all aspects of their daily lives. Okay, so I have talked about this as a way of thinking about various aspects or facets of the person, the thinking person. What are the cognitive conditions which lead to, accompany, affect interactions with information, and so on? The feeling, what emotional, understanding people's emotions, and with respect to interacting with information, and so on. A wide variety of different facets of how people interact with information. I think what's important here, also in an era of information ubiquity, is having some means to support people in, I hate to say this, somehow filtering what is proposed to them. Okay, I think what you have said is certainly the case that we as human beings, at least in the kinds of contexts and the kinds of societies of which we're talking about, have available and are to us, and indeed are faced with a lot of information, a lot of messages, if you will, which various parties are interested in having us look at. Okay, how we need to think, information science needs to think carefully about how to support people in making sure that in reducing information overload enhancing information use with respect to what's important to them. Okay, this, I suppose, means thinking about different ways of thinking about how information systems work and how people, and in particular in thinking not just everyday life information seeking, as Leo Savolinin has proposed and many others have proposed, but thinking really about everyday life and information all around us. How can we, as information scientists, design circumstances and systems which support people in interacting with what's appropriate to them in their specific context at this specific time for these specific reasons.
So, if I have understood your response correctly, of course, you said you hate to use the word filter. So we need appropriate filters for appropriate contexts and situations for people in their, let us say, daily information interaction.
That's right. I think, yes.
Okay, some kind of a, yeah.
You've condensed very nicely. Yeah.
Nick, you are a leader. That brings us to, since you mentioned about information interaction, you've been a leader in integrating these two strands of information science, as I call it, as that is one strand, information behavior research, more on user and behavior research. The other strand is information retrieval research. However, information behavior has changed again currently in the current information ubiquity, because information behavior is not the same as we were doing in the olden information retrieval systems, right? There is this abundance, the deluge of information, etc. So in a way, we are there was a time when we would go and search for information, pull information. That was called the pull, right? Now we are pushed information. Everybody is pushing information, right? We are getting all these alerts, etc. So the push is now the dominant paradigm, I would say, in information systems or information retrieval systems. And added to this, information behavior is very individualistic and situated in varied contexts. So my question is, how can information retrieval system or IR research integrate this information behavior with information retrieval?
Okay. Well, first of all, it's not at all clear to me that the fundamental aspects of information behavior have in fact changed. Okay, that is, technological means of access have changed, right, and how people behave. Quantity has changed. Availability of desirable information has changed, right? But what people want to do, and to some extent, what people want to do, which is what I understand information behavior to mean, right? Maybe it hasn't changed. We take the example of information sharing. Now, information sharing is something that information science only recently understood as an information behavior, right? Because basically, until systems which better supported information sharing became available, it wasn't an obvious thing that we were looking at. Information science was concerned with other kinds of behaviors. But it is the case that people engaged in information have always engaged in information sharing. That's a fundamental information behavior. And it was constrained by the technologies of communication, which were available to people for sharing information. So, but they still, okay, so people have taken advantage of the technological means that have been made available to them to enhance, and this looks like new behaviors. But what I want to suggest is that these aren't new behaviors. These are the same kinds of behaviors that we have seen within other technological milieu. And judging the relevance, the usefulness of information, seeking information, perhaps ignoring that which is irrelevant to us or unuseful to us. These are things that people have always engaged in. Maybe they've been heightened now through technological capabilities. But it seems to me that we can still, that understanding that the basic ideas associated with information behavior, understanding why people want to do what it is that they're doing, that is, why they behave in the ways that they behave, is something that we can that is fundamental to the design of systems for interacting with information. Now, it's true that we didn't used to design systems. We always designed systems for filtering. The first computerized information retrieval systems were selective dissemination of information systems, that is, filtering systems. Okay, and I would say, that so we have some experience, and I think that we can still take advantage of research and understanding why people behave, why people engage in the kinds of behaviors that they do, in order to understand how better to design systems for those purposes. Now, we may change these for a variety of reasons. Okay, I'm sure that we're going to be talking, for instance, about something like personal assistance or something like that, right? Where we design technologies which support the behavior, for instance, of filtering out that which is of filtering to discover that which is useful for a person from that which is not useful for a person at any particular point. I think that the general research approach is still valid in this new information milieu.
Well, I partially agree with you in the sense, some of the things such as, our judgment of, say, relevance and things like that of our seeking information hasn't changed fundamentally. But information behavior, you are talking about information sharing, right? People share information in the sense, when I say people, I mean even the systems, they keep alerting you. So because of all this, you may call it as, let's say, distraction, right? I want to look for something. I go to a system whether it's Google or any other system also, looking for something, but then the system alerts me about this, etc. Right? So that changes my seeking behavior. That's what I meant by, the push. What I mean by that is the push factor. Earlier in the olden days, we did not have this push factor. You go and pull information from the system. So to that extent, it was static. You mentioned about SDI, say selective dissemination of information. So there, the profile of the user was to some extent constant. To some extent, but today it is so dynamic. You look for something, and then the system thinks that you are looking for that and changes and pushes some other information. So it's in that context I said, how can we, we can integrate, but in the sense of information seeking behavior or information behavior with information retriever, but it is constantly changing.
Right.
That was my question.
Yeah, I take your point. I think we have new systems that with which we engage, well, I guess that those who have an interest in our seeing things, which benefit the sender, right? We've always had this. Our information retrieval systems have not been designed around that. Okay, you're quite right. What we need to do now is to design ways to support people in combating this, it's in understanding, designing systems, services, methods for helping people to navigate through this, to take advantage of what's offered, while being careful about maintaining the priority of the user's interests, the person's interests. I almost said I don't like to use the word user any longer. Okay. The person's interest, the individual's interest as primary, right? Okay. We have two parties in these communication systems, right? There's the sender and the recipient. And they both have interests which may be competing. Okay. So I would like us to be able to design systems which support, which maintain the recipient's interests as primary.
Yeah, I've read somewhere or heard one of your lectures where you have suggested that we need to devise means, or rather ensure that the people have some measure of control about what is the information or data presented to them, as well as the modalities of interaction. So I guess that's what you're meaning, right? So the user should be still, or rather person should be in control of the interaction rather than the system being in control of the interaction, right?
That's right. That's precisely right. I would like that to be the case. Okay. And as you've not rightly pointed out, this is often not the case, right? Yeah. Okay. It's unclear whether we can combat this. Okay. However, I noticed that, in fact, even governments like the European Union have begun to address this issue. Right. So it may be possible to do something in order to help people in this kind of navigation. Okay, maybe at social levels, more likely in the individual interaction, in supporting the individual interaction in some way. How we might make this control possible is problematic, difficult, but it's possible, I believe. And it's a goal towards which we should strive.
So earlier you have made some suggestions regarding changing the basic assumptions of information retrieval. So what are these basic assumptions and what needs to change and why?
Okay, well, in an era of information ubiquity, as we've talked about, right, there's lots of stuff all around us all of the time, which could be useful for us in various circumstances. We in information science, in particular in information retrieval, which is where my work has been most focused, have thought that, have assumed that people use information retrieval systems by explicitly going to them, like blogging, going to Google and putting in a search. Okay, we've assumed that in general there will be one way to do things, one kind of support, the general purpose search engine. That these are assumptions that I think these are the assumptions that need to be changed. We need to support people in their everyday lives, not users of information systems. We need to, information systems, people's interactions via information systems with information needs to become transparent rather than explicit. And we'll need, because of the wide varieties of information types, media, modes, sources that we have now available to us, different kinds of information retrieval techniques will be necessary within this transparent system, right, that people can see. Not transparent in the sense of understanding the system, but transparent in the sense that you don't feel that you're interacting with a system at all, right? So that it is part of one's life. Some people, Chirag Shah, for instance, have just said, prospective information retrieval. I'm not so sure about this, but, to be able to predict what might be useful to a person at any given time is something that we'd like to do. Okay, so people, not users, meaning we need to understand people in their entirety rather than just as users of systems. Okay, meaning perhaps that we need to go far beyond the anomalous state of knowledge, right, to think about how to support people, right? That we interact with information as directly as possible, right, rather than mediated. And that this interaction be supported in ways that are directly relevant to the mode, medium, source of the information itself. Okay, so all of these things are happening to some extent already in information retrieval research. Multimodal, multimedia information retrieval is an example. Conversational information retrieval is another. All right. I don't want to mention, well, I will eventually mention ChatGPT, but yes, can pass on that right now. All right. But I think these are the things that I think, okay, we need to study, understand, and respond to the person in all of their aspects in their daily lives, as they think, as they feel, as they engage with others, as they engage in goal-seeking activity, as they engage in non-goal-seeking activity, as they engage with others in their life. Okay, these are the kinds of things that getting away from the underlying assumptions of users of information retrieval systems separate from their daily life and daily goals is where we need to go next.
So we need to move from the goal-seeking user to a person or people. So understanding the person in his or her entirety, understanding their lives, their activities, etc., as well as to some extent you even mentioned predicting what they could be doing, etc. So that brings us to the other important question, or you can even say the elephant in the room. We are talking about one, for example, and you have mentioned about you have been advocating actually radically personalized IR, right?
Right.
So how do we sort of balance the two paradoxical issues or features? On the one side, we want a system which knows us so well that it can predict what I want. But at the same time, I don't want the system to know me so well or better than me in one sense, right? Because that's what we're already saying. Oh gosh, this Google knows about me more than myself, right? So how do we balance these two paradoxical requirements or wish list, right? I want Google to know what I want or everything that I'm going to want, but at the same time, I don't want it to store all that information, maybe. Right. So how do you balance?
Right. Okay. Well, I think that the most obvious way to address this is through that knowledge residing on one's own computing devices, and not on the devices of the providers, of the senders, as it were. This is not it's not at all clear that that's possible. Okay, one can imagine a personal assistant, a software assistant that knows about me, that resides on my own computing devices, monitors what I do, what I have done, what I am doing now, and maintains this model of me, right? And my interests and my behaviors. And according to this model, adjusts, on the one hand, what is pushed at me, right, to be filters, if you will, that which is pushed at me to correspond to what might be most useful for me at this point. Right? And similarly, when I engage in information seeking, right, mediates mediates what comes back to me, right, through that knowledge of myself, perhaps by mediating what gets sent to the search engine, right? Now, it's certain this might work, but it's certainly also the case that the search engines are very good at inferring on the basis of what's sent to them stuff about me. Okay, so it's entirely possible that it may be not completely possible if one does radical personalization of the sort that I'm talking about, to keep all of that information private. It may not be possible, in which case maybe it's not a good idea to do it at all, right? My problem with this, with the maybe it's not a good idea, is that it's quite likely that if we don't engage in trying to develop systems which do this, which keep it private, right, and give up on it, the senders, those who are pushing at us, those who have perhaps other interests than ours, will do it anyway, will be able to do it anyway, right? And so I think it's better that we try to maintain, that we make an effort to design systems which maintain individual control rather than giving up at all. Okay. So I think that doing some measure of personalization of the sort that I've described is going to be necessary in order to do the kind of work that we'd like a system to do. And the only way that I can see of keeping that private is to keep it local.
It's a tall order. I mean, we want that to be local, then, because then local meaning, each person has to have the infrastructure that is needed and all of that. Maybe, some other way of something like the disappearing messages, or maybe it is accessible only when we go back to the system. When I interact, my information history or whatever you call that as should be active. Otherwise, it should not be there.
Yeah,
but
right. We can do this. I mean, our computing devices are now so powerful that this is. I don't believe this is any longer an issue that can it be done. It will be done.
Yeah,
it could be.
I understand what you're saying, that the power, the technological power is there in terms of having these things at the user or the person's end. But then to sort of I would say manage that, the person's their capability, their savviness, the software or technological savviness becomes an issue. I guess we don't know. It is still an sort of an uncharted territory, right? I mean, it should still be possible to come up with. So anyway, we will come to because we are talking about a personal assistant, like a genie. We want a genie who...
That's right.
Right? A genie who is at our, beck and call, at the same time still listens to us. So in the AI era, you did bring about the Chat GPT thing. I'm sure you have interacted with Chat GPT. Do you think it is at least somewhere closer to that kind of a assistant who helps us in our information retrieval, information interaction?
Well, I think that there's the general what I take to be the general understanding of Chat GPT in the context of information retrieve, supporting people in their information seeking, is it produces an answer.
Yes.
I don't actually, and I think this is very dangerous. because people will take it as a true or correct answer without thinking about it, without doing all of the things that we understand to be associated with information and media literacy, right? It's very, we already see this in information retrieval systems that provide the answer up in the upper right-hand corner, right? School children, it's been shown, no matter how much they've been trained, educated in checking sources, doing multiple searches, looking through results pages, inevitably will take that answer as the satisfactory answer. Satisficing is a human, is a basic human way of dealing with information. As chat or GPT or large language model has appeared to be used in Bing, for instance, is a little bit different. I see it. It appears to me that what's going on in Bing, I'm not dead sure about this, is that retrieval results take place and the large language model is used to generate a summary based on those results. This is quite different from what the chat GPT does, right, which is based on the data that it's trained on in producing answers. So it may be that these large language models will be able to do things that we couldn't do before in interesting and useful ways. The problem for us is to make sure that that's how it's used and not used in ways that mislead people. That I'd also like to point out that calling it chat GPT is a misnomer. I mean, it doesn't do a conversation. It answers questions. Okay, this is not a conversation. And it has no understanding of you, right? Which is part of a conversation, of a chat, okay, if you will. Okay, so I think, and it's that kind of interaction that we should be supporting, right? I will go back to Robert Taylor's filters as describing how a person wanting to help another person to find information useful for that person interacts with them and how they tell one another about one another's capabilities and interests and desires and goals. This is the kind of conversational information retrieval that we should be looking for when people want to engage in this kind of information seeking.
Yeah. And like, as you said, ChatGPT are the large language models which are behind them. They don't know you or the person, the asker, as well as you know, or what you know or what you do not know. Or it brings us back to the ask, your model of ask, anomalous state of knowledge, whether anonymous or whatever, that state of knowledge that I have, the chat GPT doesn't know. So it could lead to misinformation for a variety of reasons. At least my own experience recently, I was reading something about, the Google's deep mind work in the area of protein folding, etc. So I wanted to actually test Chat GPT and asked question about some of the latest, breakthroughs in protein folding. So it gave me a list of breakthroughs, but it did not mention DeepMind, that is Google's DeepMind's breakthroughs. Okay, because it's a rival. Then I asked a question. What about, next question was I asked because I knew that it is, I mean, by design, it has not mentioned DeepMind and its, breakthroughs there. When I asked what has been this DeepMind thing, then it gives me, oh yeah, like this, So in a way, after I prompt, and then it got to know that I know about DeepMind. So yeah, I mean, the point here is not about whether I'm just testing or not, but if I take that information or the result, the output that Chat GPT has given, that is misleading because
That's
it
right.
gave me list of 10 or so. I asked it, I think, for 10 breakthrough things that have happened in protein folding, and it did not include one of the breakthroughs, which is from the DeepMind.
Right.
So if I take it as the truth or the real answer, then it's not true. So we have, I mean, there are still lots of problems in a variety of ways that that Chat GPT or the large language models have. So probably in a good, I mean, probably it's good for us that it is still a long way off. The personal assistant that we are looking at, I don't know, because people say that it's just around the corner. We have to wait and see. So that brings me to the sort of again, in a way, last question, back to this, user-centered cognitive paradigm. So you have been advocating, and even in this conversation, our chat, you have been saying that it should be user-controlled, user-centered paradigm, right? Do you think that we are going to have that control in the future in our interactions? Information interaction, which is user centered and user control, is going to continue or going to happen or not? And then what is the future of information science? What should we be focusing on?
Well, okay. I think, first of all, we should be focusing on person and not user. I think that the situation is that we need to be able to control, to devise systems which allow the person control over what they interact with. And if we don't devise systems like that, if that are person-oriented, that are individual-oriented, to control the interaction to, we will have systems which are oriented to the sender, and I think that's a bad idea. What we need to do is, I think, the directions that information science should take are those which we've talked about in this hour. That is, to think, better to understand how a person's interactions in daily life are related to their interactions with information around them, and what it is about what characteristics of the person are most relevant for which are most relevant for being able to properly choose that which choose is a wrong word, and I'm a bit of a loss. Filter, choose. I don't like these words, but to allow to have some degree of control over what it is that a person interact to make sure that that which they interact with is that which is useful for them at their particular time. We need to do this in a way that tries at least that tries to ensure privacy. I think that's, as we discussed, I think that's something that's very difficult to do, and I think that it's an important research area, right? But in trying to think about technological ways to do this, but I think it's also important for us to think about it clearly. Can we do it? And then should we do it? As I said, I think that if we don't do it, somebody else will, right? And that's why I think we should, as information scientists, we should take the initiatives in trying to develop systems which do this kind of thing, but do it with the individual's control over the interaction rather than with the centers. That's where I think we should be going.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's very important that particularly, information science as a field and information scientists as professionals, we somehow strive towards taking charge or the stewardship of the people-centric information environment, I would say, probably, right? That's where our goal should be. So that's your advice to the young researchers in information science, right?
Yeah, right. I like how you said that, people-centric.
Because I think that way, the information schools or the iSchools are doing that kind of a steering, the whole credo of iSchools. Information, technology, and people are society-centric. I think that's very important. That's the value proposition from the iSchools.
That's right.
So thank you so much, Nick, for this opportunity to have this. You have been very generous with your time. Thank you so much.